Yeah, I remember watching that being like, this is just weird. Like, it's not that, like, he's one of the greatest of all time, but I'm like, this is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine it was kind of weird for him as well. I'm sure he was looking at the clock and like, sure about this? You don't want to put me on later?
Yeah. Yeah, and didn't he do the whole hand turn on the light thing too? It's like, it's already kind of light.
Yes, we can see you clearly coming all the way down and up the stairs, so I don't think you need to do it, but, go ahead, turn all the lights back on for us. Now, being a fan the way you were, what made you finally decide, okay, I'm going to take the leap, I'm going to actually try to do this myself?
So what got me interested in wanting to learn what I'll call now is the art of pro wrestling was actually a couple years later watching the USWA. And you were talking about, Lawler would come in and out because he was doing commentary at WWF. This is one of the times when he was around 96. And Memphis was always known for those music videos, right? They had the best video packages. And for Lawler, he had so many they could just recycle them whenever he was coming back in. I believe this was the King of the Mountain music video. And there's just a whole bunch of clips of him throwing fire. And for some reason that just, I don't know, that just took my imagination. And I was like, at some point, and I was playing football at the time, so I thought, football was also a potential career in the future. But I was like, if football doesn't work out, or once I'm done playing football, that's always the thing, right? Once I've had a few years in the NFL, I'll try to be. And it was specifically, honestly, because I was like, and I'll learn how to throw fire. Because I thought after back body drops, maybe fire throwing day. I don't know what was in my head. I was 10. But that's what I thought.
I mean, you still have Jericho throwing fire, so, and he's a wizard. So I think, you could bring the fire back. It's easy.
Oh, it's in my bag at all times. I've thrown the fireball. I have learned how to do it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't wrestling school that I learned how to do it like I thought I would.
They don't teach that on day 2 of wrestling school, is throwing fire?
Yeah, unless I missed it, I think it might have was supposed to be like front roll, back bump, fire. I think it was somewhere in there, but I missed it.
I don't have to start a wrestling school now just to teach people how to throw fire.
I remember the best advice I was given was you don't throw it, you present it, because it's so light. If you throw it, it's just going to stay right where it's at.
Wow, I never thought about that. That's very true.
I didn't until I threw my first fireball and it didn't go anywhere near the guy.
That's always been so awkward when, wrestling is a one-take job. And so, if something like that messes up, you've got to sell it like crazy. So I imagine the guy was like, all right, well, here I am.
Yeah, it didn't come near his face. It floated down, hit his belly a little bit. So we were able to cover. Still wasn't what we were wanting.
Of course, yeah.
We want a dude to come in next week with an eye patch and all this stuff, and it's like, all right, we're going to have to, tape your belly a little bit.
Abdominal injuries are sometimes the worst injuries because, everyone's got to bend over, everyone's got to sit down, everyone's got to, try to get back up, so it's the little things like that people don't really think about.
Yeah, that is 100% legitimate. I have strained my abdominal muscles before, and those take months to heal because you're constantly re-injuring, feels like. And yeah, I'm notorious for working stuff, so.
There you go. Yeah, I remember Mick Foley saying the worst injury he ever had was an abdominal one. And I was like, of all the injuries, you lost part of your ear. But nope, it was an abdominal one.
Yeah, I had read his book as well early on. And I was like, yeah, that's weird. And then I had mine, and I was like, oh, no, it makes perfect sense.
I get it. Mick is not a liar.
Yeah, no, he's a lot of things. Most of them good. Liar's not one of them.
Liar's definitely not one of them. He is a long storyteller, but he is definitely not a liar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, but they're at least entertaining stories.
They're always amazing. I love listening to his podcast, but sometimes I just can't. I get distracted due to all of his stories because he'll always have a side story for everything, which is great because you get more of the, more pieces to the puzzle that you didn't realize were there. But, so again, sometimes it can be a little long-winded and you're like, well, I just want to know about this part of it. But, I'll go down the road with you.
Right.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the NWA, there's so many legends that come through there. Who have you kind of crossed paths with and maybe grabbed some advice and sat under their learning tree?
So in regard to the legends, and this actually predates my work with the NWA, being a Tennessee boy, I've been lucky enough to share a whole bunch of locker rooms with Ricky Morton.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere. So, like I said, even prior to the NWA, I was hanging out with Ricky, getting advice from Ricky. And just, I don't know, Ricky's cool in that even though you never truly are, he always acts like you're his peer. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Ricky's he never acts like he's that legend, but he is. And I think if he was still alive today, he'd be with the NWA right now. Tracy Smothers was another legend that just helped me out tremendously, all through everything. Tennessee, I was kind of spoiled. I was telling somebody this the other day. When I first broke in, not only were there a lot of just really good local hands who were the tail end of the territory guys who were still, they're close to hanging them up, but not quite yet. And then the older guys who were still working, like Tracy, Ricky was there a lot. I've worked with Bunkhouse Buck, Tommy Rich, a lot of the Southern guys, Jamie Dundee, Wolfie D, PC-13, Bill Dundee, they all came through and they were all still working. Some to various degrees of should they be. Not all of them were the ageless wonder like Ricky. But they all could teach you, you know what I mean? Some of the older guys who weren't getting around as good as Ricky, but they could teach you that you don't have to do a whole lot to still get the reaction.
This is true. I always hear the less is more aspect of that when, I hear veterans talking about, younger guys, obviously they slow it down and they'll say, less is more. So I imagine they were saying and doing the same thing.
Yeah, they really were. And it's weird, right? You go to some independents and you see that guy who's going to tell you less is more. And sometimes it's just old lazy guys, right? But then sometimes it's guys who know. They really know what they mean. They know with this little thing I can get a reaction. And you especially young, you don't know who's what.
Yeah.
Right? When you're young in the business, you just think everybody's a super vet and you should listen to everybody. But then eventually it comes a time where it's okay, who should I listen to, who shouldn't? And I think a lot of wrestling is finding out who the right people are.
Oh, that makes sense. What do you think the best thing that Ricky Morton has told you that you maybe didn't get at the time, but later you're like, oh, I see everything now. He was right.
Two things. One, Ricky was very much a less is more guy. But he was never, it wasn't a lazy less is more guy, obviously. But Ricky was, how long I can sell one punch? How long, Ricky? Until you hit me with the next. And he'd be he'd see a guy just sit in the corner and just keep getting chopped. And he's like, that dude's just beating himself up for no reason. Take one, drop down, sell it. It's wasted movement.
Right.
When you're young, it doesn't make sense to you. When you're young, it's especially when you're in the ring, because seconds feel like minutes in the ring.
Right.
If you're doing 4 seconds of not doing anything, it feels like forever. But it's really nothing when you go back and look at it. So there was definitely that. Ricky would also say start slow and taper off, but I think that was more of a joke. But yeah, probably the selling thing would be the biggest thing. Selling's the most important part of the match. That's where you can hook it. You can have a good match with no shine at the beginning. You can do a hot start. Get them behind that baby face, because the sell makes the comeback, which makes the rest of the match. And that's what a big part of what I've learned from Ricky. And I would always love to watch Ricky, because everyone wants to be tough guys now.
Yeah.
You know, Ricky would be darn near crying, and he'd be reaching out for somebody in the front row, and darn it, they'd be reaching back. You know what I mean? So he knows just with selling, he can hook people.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is arguably, without a doubt, one of the best sellers ever. And then obviously, you know, his resume speaks for that, because, you know, back then, yeah, tag teams got some attention, but they didn't get near as much attention, obviously, as like the singles guys. And that's why you had, like, you know, some companies had 3 or 4 different singles titles, but they only had one tag title. But anytime they would be in an angle with somebody, they would make it the best angle ever. And they would, you know, you'd have, you know, as much as you said, he's on the verge of crying, reaching out to people. You literally have women of all ages in the front row, even in the back row, crying and like wanting to help, you know, Ricky get to make the tag and, you know, just get out of that, you know, the pain that he was in.
Oh, 100%. I hate to share somebody else's story, but I've been lucky enough to hear a whole bunch of stories from a lot of people. I got to spend at Pork Chop Cash, and he was telling me when the rock and roll first started around the Memphis area, and it was Pork Chop Cash and Troy Graham, and they were working with the Rock and Roll Express, and he says they're just getting on Ricky, and the people are getting closer and closer in the ring, and Pork Chop keeps going, all right, Ricky, they're getting a little worked up, fight back a little bit. And he's like, nah, man, not yet. And they get on him more and more, and finally he said they're about to come through the ropes. And Cash is like, Ricky, they're about to kill us. He said Ricky throws one punch and they sit down. They were playing the people like marionettes, you know, and Ricky knew, you know, I want to get them almost into the ring, and I'm going to throw this punch to save my opponent's backside, because they're going to get in the ring if I don't. But he was going to make it wait as long as humanly possible till he did it.
And that's what's so great. Like, I imagine, you know, you've probably had moments like that too, where you are, you know, you think, okay, well, or you might think, or somebody else you're having a match with is thinking that they need to, you know, go to the next thing, or, you know, try to hit the next sequence. But you're like, no, stay here, you know, let's just let it breathe. Let them catch up, and then, you know, then you're off to the races.
Yeah, when everything's firing on all cylinders, and I've had it a few times, everything's just firing on all cylinders, and you lay there, and you just know you've got them.
Yeah.
Like, hard not to verbalize. And, you know, there's been times where we've done something on a, you know, usually a finish that's been creative or something like that. And, you know, anytime you come up with something that's a little bit creative, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. It might. We'll see. And then when it does, you know, sometimes you just lay there and you're like, got him. You know, I've done a couple of things where, like, the people suspended disbelief enough to think I was legitimately injured. And, like, you know, I always would get hyped up on that, but the moment I get through the curtain or there's not people around me, you know, I get fired up because that means I did my job.
Yeah. Now, we talked about how you've gathered some advice from other veterans, but you have been doing this for, you know, 17 years now. What kind of advice do you give to younger guys or girls that come up to you and ask you questions?
So that's hard, because when I look at myself, like, I don't think I'm somebody who could give you advice on how to be a big star, because I've never been showcased in that light. And I don't take that as anything derogatory. You know, I've gotten real good as I've gotten older about looking back at what I've done and what I've accomplished and what I'm very proud of, but not